Lytudiep greets dear viewers. Lytudiep is extremely confused when she stands in front of three men. Jame, her lover. John, the kidnapper who could be the father of the baby in her belly. kindCEO is the one who caused everything. Will Jame still accept Lytudiep? What is the truth behind? Let's follow along today. The sun was dipping behind the low-rise buildings as Lytudiep made her way to the small street-side cafe where she and James used to meet. Evening wrapped around the quiet road, and with each step she felt the weight of her secret heavier than ever. In her hands, she carried new police files, evidence that John and his notorious associates had been arrested. Her heart pounded as she approached James, a compassionate leader with boundless patience. Waiting in the corner booth, James looked up, his face softening at her entrance. No words spoken, his eyes alone offered the fortress of support she needed. Deep closed the distance, voice trembling but determined. They've caught him, John and three of his men. But he's refusing to talk. She unfolded the documents. He used my father as bait to conceal his entire money laundering operation. Thinks he can mask a drug empire by blaming my dad. I was wrong to hate him for so long. James offered a slow nod. We'll follow every lead. We'll find your missing friend. Dig into this Thailand connection John mentioned. We'll do it together. Though the cafe seemed deserted, a spark of purpose illuminated the space between them. That evening, an uneasy visitor appeared at James's doorstep. A man named Hugh arrived with a briefcase full of cash and a chilling proposition. Help me reduce John's sentence, he said smoothly. And you'll get $1 billion dong now and 2 more later. I run routes out of the country, I can protect him. His casual tone and thinly veiled bribe knifed through the calm of James's living room, keeping his expression controlled. James listened, tucking away every nuance for later. After the man left, James contacted his team. Check Hugh's trail. No one with ties to trafficking or fraud gets a free pass. Meanwhile, Deep awoke in a small, unfamiliar room, exhausted from fever. An elderly woman gently attending to her offered a cool drink. As Deep reached for food, her hand froze at her belly. She felt the life growing there. Tears welled up. She was pregnant. And the father was John. Fear, confusion, a spark of love, it all swirled inside her. Night fell. And under moonlight, Deep quietly slipped out of the house. She had to get back to James. She owed him the truth. A short ride later, she found James waiting outside, his silhouette lit by a single lamp. The reunion was wordless. They embraced as one in the night. Soon came the night they dreaded, a meeting at an abandoned warehouse. Rust and dust coated the concrete floor. In the harsh circle of a single bulb stood John, his swagger gone, replaced by something raw. James, determined and protective, and Duke, the detective they trusted, whose eyes seemed to gleam with ulterior motives. Caught in the middle was Deep, her fate resting on every word exchanged. John spoke first, his voice low. I still love you. We have a child coming. Please, let me make it right. His hands trembled, not with fear, but apology. You used me, and my father, as a shield for your crimes. Deep's voice cracked. Our child. If you're really going to be a father, show it. I'll no longer be a pawn. James placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. His eyes met John's. She's right. Whatever happens, we're protecting her and the child. John's breath hitched. He looked away, silent. Then Duke stepped forward, USB in hand. Stop pretending, he sneered. I have everything, evidence, names, transactions. Help John, and I'll wipe it clean. Want a plea deal? Or freedom? You'll pay. James stiffened. You're a detective? Yeah, Duke said with a cold smirk. A detective who plays both sides. Who pays more wins. As his words fell like daggers, the thrum of engines crept closer. Hidden units of law enforcement converged outside. James didn't hesitate. He lowered his voice but raised his presence. Enough. Duke. You crossed a line. Taking a step forward, he slapped the USB from Duke's hand. Truth is not for sale. John slumped to his knees, tears breaking free as he gazed at Deep. She responded with a gentle look and a quiet past. I choose him. She pointed to James. Before Duke could react, the police burst in. In the chaos, Duke fled, only to be caught in seconds. John was handcuffed on the demolition-scarred floor. Later, John faced court with charges stacked high: trafficking, laundering, human smuggling. Duke was stripped of his badge and caught in a corruption dragnet. Months later, Deep gave birth. James sat close outside the delivery room, head bowed, hands clasped tightly around hers. When the baby finally entered the world with a cry, James stepped forward. You don't belong to him, but to us, he whispered as he drew the child into his arms. Deep wept with relief. Their family, born from pain, built on love and redemption, found its first breath. As the sun climbed, they exited the hospital together. James carrying their child, Deep leaning on his shoulder. They walked into a new day. What began with betrayal and violence ended with trust, unity, and hope anchored in the warmth of finally finding one another.